Pokemon has always been a kid's game, and in the last few years, it's really played on adult nostalgia to keep it in relevancy. Regional forms, remakes of older games, spin-offs lost in time, the franchise is torn between tradition and expansion, the old versus the new. The Indigo Disk wrestles with this concept as well, through its story and Pokemon found throughout the zones and gameplay. Even the setting hints at locales and characters from the past, but one thing is clear, the Pokemon Company continues to get in its own way. From how exciting all of the new things sounded for Scarlet and Violet to being the first Pokemon game that I really don't want to play for a second time or even beyond that. The games are special in that they are a fun time in a world to explore, but most things can only be explored once. Now with a return to Unova, sort of, and the ability to bring even more Pokemon into your Pokemon Home collection, with many having their first debut on the Switch right near the rumored end of its life cycle, did the Indigo Disk really bring up the bottom line of what Pokemon games should be? Or did it hammer in a new low for the franchise and genre as a whole? Let's head back to class at the Blueberry Academy in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, The Hidden Treasures of Area Zero Part 2, the Indigo Disk's Loop. Wow, that's a mouthful. Before we get into the first topic here, I need to address the obvious change of scenery. I flew from my home in Chicago to my parents' house in Phoenix, Arizona for the holidays. I had booked my plane the night before the Pokemon DLC's release date was announced. Not that it would have really changed my plans, but the video footage, both of the game and my playtime in it, may be a little different or even slightly worse quality than usual. Sorry for that, I'm doing my best with less than ideal settings. I am in a laundry room right now after all. On to the topic at hand though. The most important part of any Pokemon game, the Pokemon themselves. With Scarlet and Violet as well as the first DLC, the Teal Mask, we were introduced to many new Pokemon and many returning ones. The Indigo Disk follows suit here, with the addition of many returning faces and a few new ones, but still misses the mark of completing the dex on the Switch by 9. Out of over 1,000 Pokemon, to leave just 9 still waiting for their addition to the Switch games seems like it was just out of spite to the fans at that point. The positives here are that there were some new evolutions added and 4 new paradoxes as well to balance out the overall collection of the game. But adding 6 new Pokemon and leaving out 9 old ones seems a bit silly to me. The Pokemon Company did bring in 1 new Pokemon that we knew was coming though, on top of the other 6, and that is Terrapagos, the Terra-type master, and key to Paldea as a whole, as well as Area Zero. Though there was no real closure on what it is, why it was there, or really anything else to explain its importance besides the new Terra type, Stella, a sort of master Terra type that allows the user control over what Terra bonus it gets. That's not to say it was a game changer for the overall play of the game, but maybe the competitive scene will have something to say about that in time. Speaking of the legendaries and the paradoxes, 4 new paradoxes were introduced with this DLC, finishing out the 2 groups hinted at from the base game. Iron Boulder and Iron Crown complete the trio starting with Iron Leaves, aka the Paradox Swords of Justice, and Gouging Flame and Raging Bolt finish out the trio started by Walking Wake, aka the Legendary Beasts. I am still unsure why these 2 groups were chosen. Gen 8 gave regional forms to the legendary birds, so the next group being the beasts makes a lot of sense. I guess the Regis also got love in Gen 8 with the addition of Regieleki, Regidrago, and we're all a little Gen 4'd out as well with the Lake Trio not being well suited for the Paradox treatment. I guess it makes the most sense, but it feels off to me. The biggest returning group of Pokemon for Scarlet and Violet though is the starters. Every starter from every generation is now here and available to catch, breed, and explore with in the DLC, making the return of many of my personal favorites from throughout the years, but also marking the return of some metas that I'm sure we'll hear about in the next Wolfie Glick video. Besides the competitive scene updates and the return of starters though, I will say that the biomes of the terrarium is a fun way to explore and catch Pokemon. I love the idea, and even in practice, it's fun to just run around and find Pokemon without everything relying on a national map or bumping into towns. It's just the open Pokemon world, and everything Pokemon and trainers need to find is right there. As far as the gameplay of the Indigo Disk, I'm going to use the exact same line I used when we were talking about Teal Mask just a couple months ago. It's a Pokemon game, and it's still Scarlet and Violet after all. There isn't much really new, just more of it, which is kind of the point of a DLC. That being said, there are some welcome changes and new additions that enhance or change the overall grind of the games. The Mind Swap minigame, where you get to run around as your Pokemon, are a little neat side thing to do during your time at the Blueberry Academy. The addition of the coaches and tutoring is also another way to break up some of the grind of that main mission and catching them all. The new ability to fly anywhere in the game on your riding Pokemon makes traversal feel a bit more new and fresh than in the base game or DLC. But overall, the biggest change, and possibly one of the more annoying things to deal with, is the BBQs. No, this isn't a new picnic mechanic. BBQs, or blueberry quests, are a new form of questing, a term I use a bit liberally here, that allows you to generate a couple of cool things. One is a new currency called BP, or blueberry points, that allow you to change up some cosmetic things and unlock the ability to find and catch all the starters from the other gens throughout the terrarium, as well as bring around some familiar faces to talk to and trade with. These quests are a bit lacking in my opinion, as they were just grind missions a la MMO dailies or even Fortnite missions each day and each week. There isn't a cap on them really, and you can sit there and grind through, which is nice compared to the time gating of previous games I mentioned. But you need a lot of points to get through some of the new features, and it takes a long time even when doing them with a group. All in, lots of side action and some changes to the game, but overall, it's Pokemon through and through. The Blueberry Academy is probably one of the most simple, but also one of the most interesting places in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. It brings together a lot of the Uva and Naranja Academy features, some new things, and probably one of the coolest places in any Pokemon game, the Terrarium. A massive dome underwater separated into 4 distinct biomes for the growth and preservation of Pokemon in the Unova region, and really, throughout the world. The diversity within the biomes actually makes the game more fun, though it breaks some logic lines for me. For instance, there are a handful of starters that you can find in each biome. The standard logic would be that they would almost all be in the Savanna biome or the Canyon biome, but they are split up and divided amongst all 4. Even the Polar biome has a few of them. Another location you travel to in the Indigo Disk is right back to Area 0, where a new to the player level of Area 0 has been unlocked thanks to the titular Indigo Disk, a computer disk with information and the unlock code for the Underdepths, the cavern home of Terrapagos, and the origin of the crystals and the terrasolizing phenomenon. There isn't much special down here besides the first encounter with Stella terrasolizing, but it is a nice overall return to the Great Crater and Area 0 overall. The last thing we get to do is once again explore Paldea in a hunt for legendary Pokemon of the past. The legends all take residence in different parts of Paldea in different areas, and overall this feels like more fun to me than the dens and cave that we got in Sword and Shield. It actually feels like the legendary battles again. The overall feel of the world is grown with some great changes and the ability to go back into the world of the base game for a few different reasons, tying the whole game together, even if the strings are more than a bit frayed. The story laid out in the Indigo Disk is really just a continuation of the story that we started in the Teal Mask. Many of the characters that we dealt with and learned about in the first DLC are here, and have new changes and challenges that they are facing along with us. Carmine makes her return and is probably the most grounded character of the expansion. She's the exact same character that we dealt with in Kitakami, though the world around her has shifted, and she is dealing with those consequences and what they mean for her brother Kieran. Kieran has taken on a totally new persona since the end of the Teal Mask. He's gone mad with the thought of power and his want to be better than you. We are still unsure exactly what happened to him, but he has changed his look and mentality to be even darker than he was when we last saw him. He has taken on the title of the Blueberry League champion and wants nothing more than to be the best and the strongest. When the player shows up, he has a moment of shock, and his drive to beat you grows even higher. Briar returns in this expansion, and really I feel like she is the worst character we see in the whole DLC. Her personality changes, and the decisions that she makes overall in the story don't exactly fit with what we saw in the previous expansion. She loses control of herself and makes wild decisions that seem to defy even Pokemon logic. A few new characters are introduced in the form of the Blueberry Elite Four. Drayton takes the role of a selfish side character, using the player for his own gain, and has very obvious connections to Unova and the gyms and league there. He was recently defeated by Kieran as the league champion and has gone back down to the status of Elite Four, and really isn't happy about it. Another character we meet of the Elite Four is Lacey, who we are told is the daughter of another gym leader from Unova, though we don't get a name. Speculation points to Clay being her father, with her partner Excadrill being the key to her parentage. Unlike Drayton, she is kind and welcomes the player into the Blueberry Academy, though disagrees with the exchange student joining the league in the first place. The story starts off with a call from Clavel, letting you know you've been selected to study abroad in Unova at the Blueberry Academy. Upon acceptance, you venture off to the academy located in the ocean to study, learn, and grow with your Pokemon. All of that gets thrown out the window when Drayton, Carmine, and Briar find you, and you get tossed into the Blueberry League drama with a singular goal: knock Kieran down a couple pegs. Rolling through the Elite Four members here, you face off against Kieran and defeat him, leaving him broken and becoming the new league champion. Quickly after, Briar contacts you with a plan for an expedition into Area 0, along with some other companions to find the true hidden treasure there, Terapagos, in a lower level and not previously seen in-game. With Carmine and Kieran coming along, it seems like it should be a solid adventure until Briar and Kieran lose it in the caves and begin to go full crazy when they find the gem that they believe to be Terapagos deep within the cave. After a battle with Terapagos and witnessing the destruction of the Master Ball, you walk out with another legendary, and everyone seems to have snapped out of their individual breakdowns, leaving the story pretty much finished. Though, on December 20th, it was announced that an epilogue sequence would be introduced on January 11th that will hopefully answer a lot of questions that are still out there, and maybe even fix some of this mess of a story that Indigo Disk released with. There is one other additional returning character, and something fun they bring to the table. Perrin, the photographer, returns from Kitakami and challenges you once again to go out and catch new Pokemon before giving you a quest to find 2 new paradoxes that she got pictures of. Depending on your version, this is how you get your hands on the rest of the Swords Trio or Beast Trio of paradoxes. A little lackluster compared to the quests at the end of Kitakami, but new paradoxes being added is a fun time. Before we get to the glaring issues of this DLC, I really want to talk about a lot of the missed opportunities that I spotted that the Pokemon Company completely left on the table. First off, I think that the terrarium was the best part of the DLC. The zone itself, the biomes, the Pokemon, all of it. The last 9 remaining Pokemon missing, though, really sucks. These biomes that the company set up are perfect locations for 8 of them, and the last one, Furfrou, could be literally anywhere with different forms based on location. But instead, we missed 9 Pokemon overall in the Switch system. Could we still get them all with a Gen 5 remake? Yes, but the rumors surrounding the Switch successor once again in full swing for the new year, my thought is they will either have a dual release, it will be a Switch only, and we won't get any Pokemon on the new system until Gen 10, or it will be on the new system only, and we will miss 9 Pokemon for seemingly no reason. The Underdepths could have been so much bigger and better, but instead it was an Area 0 cave and not much else. The Stella Pokemon that we were down there with felt out of place for the most part, and the only wild Pokemon that weren't Stella were the Glamora line and Carbink, which felt pretty lame. The opportunities for the Stella Pokemon to have been the ones that were the paradoxes, i.e. Stella Hariyama for Iron Hand, would have been a cool concept, but instead it's just kind of random feeling. The Terapagos encounter and the overall end to the story felt incredibly weak and was rushed. I was hoping for a cool story about Terapagos or to tie in with Briar, but instead the entire cave and encounter felt horribly disappointing and ended with no fanfare. The new paradoxes being just static encounters and having no build up with how Perrin's story was used in the first DLC bugged me as well. There was nothing additional to them, besides, here's the locations of these Pokemon, have fun, and the fact that Walking Wake and Iron Leaves are now relegated to events and not even catchable in the games feels half-baked. Last, and probably least now, the hinted at mythical that caused the Loyal 3 and Kieran to fall from grace was nowhere to be found and didn't have a conclusion in this DLC. Since completing the game, and as I said earlier, the Pokemon Company has announced an epilogue chapter that will probably contain this story, I'm not quite sure why it wouldn't be there from the jump. There were a lot of things missing from this DLC that I had high hopes for after how fun the Teal Mask was, but as Pokemon does, they dropped the ball. There were a lot of issues with the Indigo Disk that almost felt worse than base game, if that's even possible. The game flat out ran worse in most cases. Texture glitches, hard freezes at times, connectivity problems, you name it, and the game messed it up. After how Scarlet and Violet were received and the seemingly upgraded experience for the Teal Mask, the Indigo Disk felt like it was 2 steps backwards. The DLC's story felt super short and hacked together, with an emphasis on wrapping it all up as fast as possible so you could go grind out your BBQs and do nothing else. So many missed opportunities, so many cool setups with disappointing endings. Flat out missing only 9 Pokemon, it just doesn't make sense really. Like I said before about the 9 Pokemon, almost all of them at this point are Unovan, and if we are getting those remakes, I would really like to see them work it out correctly for the fans. I think the National Dex system being gone is a good thing overall for the diversity of regions. However, I think there has to be opportunity for all the Pokemon to play out over a generation between remakes, new gens, spin-offs, etc. They should all be available and rendered in the best possible detail, and the Pokemon Company missed the mark here for the 5th time during the Switch's lifespan. Now, with all the hints at Unova from Drayton to Lacey and the Blueberry Academy being in Unova, they could put a new game entirely out there, and I think it would be a fun addition overall. But there were a lot of missing pieces from the stories told in the DLC that I wish could have some clearer or any resolution as the case may be. The closing of Generation 9 overall was a bit lackluster, but I really do think that I had fun with my time in Paldea over the last year plus. It definitely had its issues. From performance issues to lackluster story beats, the game has the same issues that it did when it launched in November of 2022. Scarlet and Violet are still not my least favorite Pokemon games, but the race to the bottom is close. It brought in so many new things, similar to Gen 7, but stuck to roots that are ingrained in the Pokemon universe. It could have been better. Really, it should have been. There was so much promise that just wasn't delivered on. I've said it before, the multi-dollar company that is Nintendo may need to really crack down on the Pokemon company in order to get things rolling correctly. Maybe I'm completely off base and it's Nintendo's fault. Whoever it is, they are seriously hampering the next generation of Pokemon Masters. Like I do with many things, I have hope, as misguided as that might be. I have hope that instead of focusing on just what's new, they at least pretend to care about the nostalgia of the 9 other generations. I hope that we get a game that runs well on whatever device it comes out on from day one. I really truly hope that we get a breath of fresh air in the Pokemon world that isn't just a gimmick, and most importantly, I hope that Pokemon really wants to be the very best, again.